Let's talk reverb. Now this is super cool. Reverb is like one of the coolest things about mixing music on the computer, is that you can take all of the sounds that you have in your song, whether they be loops or instruments or whatever, and you can put reverb on them, and it will make that sound feel as though it's in a place, like either in a huge room or outside or a closet or a bathroom or your bedroom or whatever. The places can be like real places, like I just described, or they can be synthesized places. They can be imaginary places that have weird properties to them that real rooms couldn't actually have. So reverb is that spacious quality, that feeling like a sound lasts over time. So instead of being d-d-k, it goes d-d-k. That'd be a big reverb ringing out in a huge room. So let's get into that. First thing to say is not all reverb plugins are equal. Not at all. Some reverbs suck. Some reverbs are awesome. The problem is, the better the reverb is, the more computing power it takes to run it. So sometimes if you're using a lot of reverbs, you have to be careful because it's going to start putting a strain on your computer. We'll talk about that when we get to it. For now, let's take a look at the kinds of reverbs that are available inside of Studio One. I've got my drums soloed here, and I'm going to come and grab my first kind. I'm in the PreSonus section of my inserts, and I'm going to grab Room Reverb, which I was using before. Where is that? Right here. Now, Room Reverb is really cool. It basically simulates various kinds of rooms, and you can actually see a little picture of the room here, and you can change its size, its width, its height, all sorts of things about it. Now, I do want to say what this is. This is an algorithmic reverb, meaning it's using algorithms, or basically mathematics, to create the reverb. So what it really does is make a whole lot of individual little echoes, individual little delays, and smears them together over time to simulate a real room. So cheap, not very good algorithmic reverbs can sound terrible, like one we're going to look at in a minute, but this one is actually pretty decent, and there's some that are even way better than this one that are made by other companies that you can bring into Studio One if you buy them. So when you open Room Reverb and in all the plugins inside Studio One, you'll find your presets up here where it says default. So if I click this, now I can see this list of all these places. Like, take a look at some of these names. A factory hall, a drum booth, concert hall, a cold cellar, a church. So say I go to church. Now I'm going to run my drums through this church. And it's like the drums are playing in a huge open church. Now if I turn it off, so as you can see, it gives a real huge sense of spaciousness to the drums. Probably too much in this case. If I go in and choose something else, like how about bedroom, turn it off and on. See, it makes it really short. It may not even be easy for you to hear if you've never listened for that kind of thing before. If I turn the mix knob all the way full, now we're only hearing the reverb, not the real drums. All the way down and back to some normal level. So all different kinds of spaces can be found in here. As you just saw, you can turn plugins on and off using this little button here, and you can also bypass the plugins using this, which is basically like turning them on and off, but you can automate the bypass. So you can have reverb turned on for a certain portion and then turn it off, and then turn on for a certain portion and turn it off, which is a pretty cool idea. So that's Room Reverb. Let's take a look at the next kind of algorithmic reverb that's inside Studio One. I'm going to remove this one, come down here and grab Mix Verb. I'm not going to say much about Mix Verb. I can't stand it. To me, it sounds terrible. It doesn't have that many presets. I would basically always go for Room Reverb over Mix Reverb. I'm just going to play with it a little bit. It has much less controls. Turn the mix all the way up. It is usable. It's very lightweight on your computer. It's not going to take up a lot of computer resources to use it. So if you already have a lot of reverbs and you need to get another one in there, you could use this. It's just if I don't really like the sound of it. If I turn it up too loud, it gets distracting to me, and I don't really like the effect it has on my mix. I'd rather use room reverb. So that being said, let's move on. The last kind of reverb available to us in Studio One is called open air. Now this is really cool. Open air is an entirely different kind of reverb. It is not an algorithmic reverb like the other ones were. It's called convolution reverb. And convolution reverb basically creates a map, so to speak, or a sample of a real space. So they take a little device into a space and it makes a little sound, and then it measures the reflections in the room, and then you can load those reflections, that reflection pattern, into open air and play your sounds through it. So your sounds can actually be played as if they were really in that room. So let's take an example. See, we have a bunch of options here. We have effect style reverbs, halls, like big halls that you might play music in, plates, that's a discussion for another day, but you should try them out. Reverbs for post-production, that's like for movies and TV shows, and then rooms. I'm gonna go for a hall, let's say, and I'll go for a medium hall. Look how many presets there are in here, it's amazing. I'll go for whatever. How about just a concert hall? And let's hear that. So this is what we're hearing now is recorded in a real space. At least the impulse that this convolution reverb is using is the recording of a real space. So if these drums were played in that space, it would sound just like this. Let's try another one. Here's a cathedral. Let's go for something smaller, like a room. How about a drum room? That sounds fitting. And let's go for drum room expander. So many possibilities here. Here's the mix knob, fully dry, fully wet. Only reverb, only dry signal. That's the only three reverbs we have to work with in Studio One. So my suggestion is going between open air and room reverb. The advantage of room reverb is because it's algorithmic, it can be changed in very dramatic ways. You can make the size of it way different, or the geometry of the room way different, and all sorts of cool stuff to experiment with. Whereas open air and all convolution style reverbs that use these real room samples can't be changed too much before they start to sound kind of strange. So these ones are best used for when you want an instrument to feel like it's really in a real room. So that would be if you're using a real instrument. So for instance, maybe on my flute, I might use open air to make the flute sound like it was really in a recording studio or a concert hall or whatever I end up feeling like it should sound like. Whereas maybe if I'm playing a synth or something like that, I might use room reverb and create my own special kind of reverb, or just use some of the presets, which is probably the best way to learn what they sound like, is just go through the presets and try them. Try them on everything. Put them on anything you want, turn the mix up and down, see what that does, short reverbs, long reverbs, just try it out and experiment. I mean, that's how I learned, is just seeing what effect it has when you try something. In the next video, we'll talk about how to use this concept of reverb in your actual mix. Like, when would you want to apply it, on what would you want to put it on, and all that kind of stuff. So I'll see you there.